Welcome back to Study Hall, the show for all you lifelong learners and curious minds out there. And today I'm about why, though.
Hmm.
Where we explore the origins of everything, we're tackling something I bet you use every single day, but probably haven't given a whole lot of thought to.
I think you've got us there.
Yeah, we're talking about why men carry wallets and women purses.
Now that you mention it, yeah, I never really stopped to wonder why, but now I'm curious. It does seem kind of ingrained, doesn't it?
Totally. So we've gathered a whole stack of historical insights, basically to figure out how we got to this point, why these everyday carry-alls ended up so different for guys and gals. It's a long story, and believe me, there are some twists and turns along the way.
I love a good historical mystery. So where are we starting our journey? Are we talking time travel here?
Well, kind of, yeah. We're going way back in time, back to ancient civilizations. And what's really interesting is that in those really early days, the way people carried their stuff was pretty much the same for everyone.
Oh, really? I would have thought maybe there are always some differences.
Nope, not really. Think ancient Egypt, for example. We've got all those fascinating tomb paintings, and you can see both men and women using these simple little pouches to carry their belongings. And get this, they're made from things like leather, cloth, even animal hides.
So pretty basic stuff, just the bare necessities, I guess.
Exactly. It was all about functionality and security back then. No fancy designer labels or status symbols to worry about. Just good old-fashioned practicality, keeping your coins safe, maybe a lucky charm or two, just the essentials.
I can just picture those ancient Egyptians strolling through the marketplace, little pouches swinging from their belts. What about the Romans? Did they have something similar?
Oh, absolutely. In ancient Rome, both men and women were rocking the bursa. It was basically a small leather pouch, usually tied securely to the belt. Again, practicality was key. They needed something sturdy and safe to carry their coins, especially for those involved in trade and commerce. It was a bustling economy back then, lots of buying and selling.
So a lot like those Egyptian pouches you were describing. But it's interesting to think that even with this shared need for practicality, there might have been some early hints of those gender differences that eventually emerged.
You're right on the money there. Even in these ancient cultures, there were some subtle signs, like, for instance, wealthier Egyptian women. They often had decorative cosmetic cases or fancy little boxes for their belongings.
So maybe a touch more style for the ladies even back then?
Right. And in Roman society, women of a higher social standing sometimes even had servants carry their bags for them. So, maybe those were the first little seeds of what would eventually become the handbag as a status symbol.
It's fascinating how these little details can offer clues to those broader cultural shifts. So we've got the Egyptians and the Romans, both using pretty much the same basic pouch for carrying their stuff. When do we start to see some real separation in how men and women carried their belongings?
We'll buckle up because our next stop takes us to medieval and Renaissance Europe. And here's where things start to get really interesting. We start to see distinct differences emerge in those carrying methods.
Okay, I'm ready for some medieval intrigue. What was happening in those times that might have led to this split?
So imagine medieval Europe. Coins are still the main form of currency. And guess what? Clothing still largely lacked those handy sewn-in pockets we take for granted today.
No pockets. Oof, that sounds like a recipe for a lot of fumbling around.
You bet. So belt pouches were still the way to go for both men and women. Just like in those earlier civilizations, they needed a reliable way to carry their coins and other essentials. But, and here's the key difference, even though both genders were using pouches, they started to evolve in different ways.
I knew there had to be a catch. So what was different about these medieval pouches?
Well, men's pouches, they were all about function. They were typically made from plain, durable materials like leather or thick cloth, tough enough to withstand daily wear and tear. And for added security, because pickpockets were a real problem back then, they might even hide those pouches beneath their tunics or cloaks.
Makes sense. You don't want to be flashing your cash around in a crowded medieval marketplace.
Right. And get this, some wealthier men even had these special alms purses.
Mom's purses. What were those for?
It was basically like a medieval version of a charitable donation envelope. They'd use them specifically for giving money to the poor. So even back then, they were thinking about giving back to the community. Now, when we look at women's pouches from this period, we see something really interesting. They were still carrying coins, of course, but their pouches often had a lot more decoration. They were often embroidered with intricate patterns, sometimes even adorned with beads or other embellishments. So there was definitely a greater emphasis on aesthetics and personal style with women's accessories even back then.
So practicality for the guys and a bit more flair for the ladies. It sounds like those early hints we saw in Egypt and Rome were really starting to take shape.
Right. And beyond just coins, women might carry all sorts of little personal items in their pouches. Things like religious relics for protection, little sewing kits for mending on the go, or even little pouches filled with fragrant herbs.
I can just picture a medieval woman with her beautifully embroidered pouch filled with all sorts of treasures.
Exactly. And, this is where we encounter a really unique and distinctly feminine accessory that really captures those evolving gender roles of the time, the chatelaine.
Chatelaine! That sounds so elegant and mysterious. What exactly was it?
Well, imagine this, a decorative belt hook or clasp worn exclusively by women. And from this clasp, all sorts of useful items would dangle.
Like a medieval Swiss army knife, but way more stylish?
Yeah, kind of. They'd have things like keys, small purses for their coins, miniature household tools like scissors or thimbles, just all sorts of things they might need throughout the day. And, it wasn't just about practicality. The chatelaine was really a status symbol, especially popular among noble women and the mistresses of large households. It was like a visible representation of their responsibilities within the home and their standing in society.
So kind of like a wearable symbol of their role and authority, and we don't see anything quite like that for men.
Exactly. It makes you think about how the way men's and women's roles were perceived really did influence the very things they carried.
It's like those accessories were almost extensions of their social identities. So we're seeing clear signs of divergence in the medieval period. What happens as we move into the Renaissance? Does that shift continue?
Oh, absolutely. The Renaissance was a pivotal period where changes in clothing styles really accelerated that split between men's and women's accessories. And for men, it all boils down to the emergence of a game changer,
Yeah.
the pocket.
Pockets. Finally, those guys get some built-in storage. It seems like such a basic thing, but I guess it was a pretty big deal back then.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Men's fashion started incorporating sewn-in pockets into their coats and breeches, offering a much more discreet and convenient way to carry their stuff. It was a total game changer and a direct ancestor of the modern wallet.
So while men were getting pockets, what was happening with women's fashion during the Renaissance? Were they getting in on the pocket action too?
Unfortunately, not so much. You see, women's fashion during this period was all about elaborate and structured garments. Think layers of skirts, petticoats, and those famously restrictive corsets.
Not exactly pocket-friendly attire.
Nope, not at all. External pouches just wouldn't have worked with those styles. They would have ruined the whole silhouette. So women had to get creative. They started using hidden pockets,
Hidden pockets? You mean like secret compartments?
basically. They weren't sewn into their main garments, but were separate pockets tied around the waist and worn beneath all those layers of fabric. They'd access them through discreet slits in their dresses. So, in a way, both men and women were seeking discretion, but they were going about it in very different ways. Men's belongings were becoming more integrated into their visible attire, while women's were being concealed beneath layers of clothing. It's a fascinating contrast.
It almost seems ironic, doesn't it? Men getting more visible storage while women's storage went undercover. So men have pockets, women have hidden pockets. What happens next in this accessory saga?
Okay, now we're stepping into the 18th and 19th centuries, and this is where those separate paths for men's and women's accessories really diverge. It's a tale of two very different fashion trends and their lasting impact on how we carry our things.
Okay, let's hear it. What were those fashion trends that sealed the deal for wallets and purses?
Well, for men, the 18th and 19th centuries were all about pockets, pockets, pockets. Sewn-in pockets became completely standard in coats, breeches, and waistcoats. Those pouches that men had relied on for centuries, they basically went out of style. Pockets were the new must-have accessory for the fashionable gentleman.
So external pouches were out, built-in pockets were in. What drove that shift? Was it just about fashion, or were there other factors at play?
Well, there's another big development that happened during this time that really cemented the wallet's place in men's fashion, the introduction of paper money.
Ah, paper money. That makes sense. Those old coin pouches probably weren't the most practical way to carry those flimsy bills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Paper money needed a new kind of storage solution, and that's where the flat, foldable wallet comes in. It was the perfect solution for carrying those newfangled bills, and it fit perfectly into those newly standardized pockets.
So the wallet wasn't just a response to a practical need, it was a symbol of those changing economic times.
Right. The wallet became a symbol of male financial independence and their increasing role in the public sphere as businessmen, entrepreneurs, you name it. It's amazing to think about how a simple change in currency led to such a lasting change in how men carried their belongings.
So pockets and wallets were becoming intertwined with men's identities. What was going on with women's fashion during this same period? Were they finally getting some pocket love?
You'd think so, right? But the story for women takes a bit of a different turn. It's kind of a case of fashion giving with one hand and taking away with the other. You see, women's fashions in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially the neoclassical Regency styles, were all about sleek silhouettes and those high waistlines. And those styles, well, they didn't allow for much in the way of bulk or disruptions to those clean lines.
So those tied-on pockets women had been using, those were out too.
Oh, absolutely. Those sleek flowing styles just didn't accommodate any kind of extra bulk. It's almost hard to imagine functioning without any pockets at all, right?
Yeah, in today's world, it seems like pockets are just a basic necessity, but I guess that wasn't always the case. So what did women do? They must have needed some way to carry their things.
That's where the handbag comes into the picture. But it didn't start out as the handbag we know today. The first iteration was the reticule.
The reticule, tell me more about that.
Well, picture a small, dainty drawstring bag, often made from fabric or silk. And it was initially intended for purely practical things, like carrying a few coins, maybe a letter or two. But you know how fashion works. It's always evolving, always pushing boundaries.
I'm sensing a but coming here.
Yeah, those reticules didn't stay small and purely functional for very long. As the 19th century progressed, they started to grow, both in size and in importance. They evolved into larger, more structured handbags and purses. And there were a few reasons for that. For one thing, industrialization was happening, and more people were traveling. Women needed bags that could carry more than just a few small items.
So practicality played a role, but I'm guessing it wasn't just about that.
You got it. You see, those handbags became much more than just functional objects. They transformed into symbols of femininity, fashion, wealth, and social status. And the fact that they were so visible, well, that just amplified their significance. Remember, women still didn't have those convenient pockets, so their handbags were on full display, broadcasting their taste, their style, and even their place in society.
So while men were discreetly tucking away their wallets in their pockets, women were carrying these very visible symbols of their identity and status. It's a fascinating contrast. And I guess that lack of pockets really did play a huge role in solidifying those cultural associations we still see today. You know, the idea of practicality for men and fashion for women.
Exactly. It's a great example of how a seemingly practical need can become so intertwined with social signaling and cultural norms. So by the end of the 19th century, the accessory landscape was pretty clearly divided. Hidden, practical wallets for men tucked away in their pockets, and visible, fashionable handbags carried by women, often out of necessity.
So what happens in the 20th century? Do these trends continue, or do we see new developments?
Well, the 20th century is really when those gendered norms we've been talking about, they become even more entrenched. It's a period of reinforcement and refinement. On the men's side, wallets continue to evolve, becoming even slimmer and more streamlined. With the arrival of credit cards, wallets start to feature dedicated card slots, further emphasizing practicality and discreet carrying. It's all about efficiency and organization.
So the wallet keeps getting more pocket-friendly. What about women's handbags? They were already fashion statements in the 19th century. Do they reach new heights of style and status in the 20th century?
Oh, absolutely. The 20th century sees the rise of major luxury fashion brands, and those brands, they really elevate the handbag to a whole new level. It becomes the ultimate fashion statement and a global status symbol for women. And we start to see those iconic handbag designs emerge, the ones that are instantly recognizable and coveted, like the Chanel 2.55 or the Hermes Birkin. Those bags become synonymous with wealth, elegance, and a certain level of exclusivity. So by the end of the 20th century, those gender norms and accessories, they're pretty much solidified. Compact, functional, concealed wallets for men, and larger, more decorative, status-driven handbags for women.
It really is amazing how these everyday accessories can reflect such profound societal trends and expectations. But here's the big question. What about the 21st century? We're living in a time where those traditional gender lines are becoming increasingly blurred. Is that happening in the world of wallets and purses too?
You know what? It absolutely is. And, there's some really interesting factors at play here. One of the biggest shifts we're seeing is the rise of gender-neutral accessories.
Gender-neutral accessories. So, bags that anyone can carry, regardless of their gender. What kinds of bags are we talking about here?
Well, think about crossbody bags, sling bags, smaller satchels, even the fanny pack, which, by the way, has made a huge comeback, often rebranded as the belt bag.
I've definitely seen those around. They do seem to be pretty popular these days.
Yeah, and there's a good reason for that. These styles, they prioritize functionality and hands-free convenience, and they really bridge that gap between the traditional wallet and the handbag. They're practical and stylish, and they appeal to a wide range of people.
So, function over form and a focus on individual preference rather than outdated gender norms. I like it. What other trends are contributing to this blurring of lines?
Another big factor is the minimalist movement and the impact of technology. People are carrying less stuff these days, thanks in part to digital technology. We got slim wallets, streamlined card holders, and of course the phone wallet. And with the increasing use of digital payment systems, we might not even need those physical wallets and purses for much longer.
It's true. I rarely carry cash anymore. My phone pretty much takes care of everything. So, technology is definitely changing the game. What other shifts are we seeing?
Well, this one might surprise you. We're seeing more and more men carrying bags that were once considered feminine, like tote bags and crossbody satchels.
Really? I have noticed that. It seems like tote bags are becoming quite popular among men.
Yeah, they are. And it makes sense. They're practical, they can carry a lot, and they can be pretty stylish too. And crossbody satchels, those are great for hands-free convenience, and they can look really sharp. So this trend is really challenging that long-standing idea that men should only carry things in their pockets.
So it's not just about practicality, it's also about men feeling more comfortable expressing their personal style, even if it means carrying a bag that might have been traditionally associated with women.
Exactly. And, the fashion world is definitely reflecting these changing attitudes. Luxury brands are marketing handbags to men, and we're seeing a lot more gender-neutral bag designs out there. And the streetwear and athleisure trends, which are huge right now, they often favor unisex styles. So it's really becoming more about personal style and functionality than adhering to those old gender norms.
It sounds like our ideas about gender are evolving, and that's reflected in even the smallest details of our lives, like what we carry in our pockets or on our shoulders.
That's a great way to put it. It's all connected. The blurring lines we're seeing with wallets and purses, they suggest that we're moving away from those rigid gender roles and embracing more diverse expressions of identity. And, practicality is becoming a universal concern, not just something we associate with one gender.
And we can't forget about those economic shifts we talked about earlier, like the move from coins to paper money and then to credit cards. Those changes had a huge impact on the development of wallets and purses. And now, with digital wallets and payment systems, we're seeing a whole new wave of change. It's mind-blowing when you think about it. So the story of wallets and purses, it's not just about carrying stuff around. It's about centuries of evolving fashion, changing social norms, and the impact of technology and economic innovation. It all comes together in those everyday objects we rarely stop to think about.
It's a reminder that even the most ordinary things can have these amazing, intricate histories. Those simple pouches from ancient Egypt and Rome, they took such a dramatic, gendered turn over the centuries. And a big part of that, as we've seen, was the presence or absence of pockets. Who knew that such a seemingly small detail could have such a profound impact? It's a great example of how fashion, function, and cultural norms all intertwine. So for all you lifelong learners out there, here's a question to ponder as we wrap up our deep dive today.
Yeah.
As we move toward an even more gender-fluid society and embrace digital solutions even more, what will the future of carrying our essentials look like? Will wallets and purses as we know them disappear completely? Or will they continue to evolve in ways we can't even imagine right now? It's a fascinating question, and it makes you realize that something as commonplace as a wallet or a purse is actually a living testament to our history, constantly changing and adapting right alongside us.
It really makes you appreciate the hidden stories all around us.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of wallets and purses. Until next time, keep those curious minds engaged.
And your pockets full or empty, as you see fit.
We'll see you in the next episode of Study Hall.
Bye for now.